Hi. So, this is a little bit of a, I don't want to call it a post-mortem, but definitely a post-decompression for my latest film project, Companion, which premiered on Friday on YouTube, and that you can now watch for free on YouTube. Go check it out. That's so fucking cheesy. So, yeah, it's been, I want to say 2 days, Sunday now, premiered on Friday. I've had 2 days to kind of wind down from the premiere because, don't know if you can tell by the project if you've seen it, I threw a lot of stuff into it, a lot of emotional stuff, let's say. A lot of personal vulnerabilities that, whether I was ready for it or not, I shared with the world, and it's out there now, and I have to feel okay about that because I felt I needed to externalize those feelings. And without getting into extreme details about the project, because I do want you to kind of drop your own interpretations and, kind of interpret it for yourself, certainly, but the desire to initiate this project it finally came to me at the beginning of, I want to say the beginning of August. I've been thinking about, seriously, before the year's over, I got to hunker down and finally do this project that I originally wanted to do in March, but felt like, it needed more time. I needed to really, really hone in on what I want to say in this piece, because it is one of the far more personal things that I put onto film probably ever. Certainly, like a lot of the documentary stuff I've done, or the meta-aware documentary stuff I've done in the past, like when I went home for my vacations and things like that and return. Those had things to say, but I wanted to keep it light, mainly just because I was also working with other people during that, like Jason and John and so forth. So I didn't want to get perhaps too real, too heavy with them, just because I don't know what their comfort would be in going into those, heavier topics or darker places. And so this one, though, it was all on me. So I'm like, you know what? You got to be in the right mindset. You got to be prepared to, if you're going to dig, you're going to dig deep. So let's do that. Let's dig deep. And that needed a lot more prep time than the contest, or I shouldn't say contest, the challenge in March made it out to be. So yeah, finally did it, shot it, edited it, premiered it. And I'm okay, everybody. Those who have seen the movie, I'm getting, great feedback. I'm appreciating the comments and feedback that I have gotten so far from friends, from viewers, from folk filmmaking colleagues on the interwebs, basically saying, like, you know what, like it. It's a raw expression, and people were able to relate to it. I'm glad people are able to relate to it and perhaps not feel too overwhelmed by it or too triggered by it. And yeah, but I've also gotten other outreaches from close to home, some friends being like, man, I'm gonna hug you next time I see you because I feel like you need it. And most touching but also kind of funny is that I got messages from my folks because they watched it, and the first thing my dad says is like, hey, do you want us to come out and see you? I'm like, I had a feeling I knew why, kind of, but I'm like, maybe why? And he's like, oh, I don't know, I just feel like, maybe you could use the visit. And I'm like, you watched the movie, didn't you? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, I'm okay, Dad. I'm gonna see you soon anyways, but because I am gonna see them soon anyways. I know, but he was like talking about an impromptu, pack your bags, dear. We're going to Jersey in the middle of the night. We're gonna surprise him in the morning. I'm like, I'm okay, Dad. I'm managing. I appreciated the check-in, absolutely, because I'm their kid. They care about me. I like to think that, but yeah, they do genuinely care about me, and they were just making sure things were okay, and I told them, yeah, things are okay, and yeah, I am okay. Now, the thing is, now that I put that expression on film and put it out there into the world, that doesn't necessarily make the anxiety surrounding that particular topic or focus, it doesn't make that go away instantaneously. In fact, that's not going away. The reality of the situation is that that's something that's going to be with me for the rest of my life. That is a thought, that is an idea, that is an anxiety that I'm going to have to manage for the rest of my life. And it's not a feasible idea, or it's not a very realistic kind of expectation that just because I had one form of art that I was able to pour it into, that it's a cure-all, that it's going to go away. But what it does do is it gives me a reminder. That film is now not living or breathing, but it's basically a eternal signpost for me in a way. It's a nice way to check in with myself and remind myself that you have felt this way before, and you're going to feel this way again, but here's how you've been able to deal with it. And I feel that's one of the great things that film can do, not just tell great stories with wonderful characters and have incredible visual spectacle to it, but to also give us sort of a time capsule, give us a reminder of who we are, who we were, who we can be, and to take comfort in that acknowledgement, to take comfort in that living, breathing tome of film. Also, just side note, in the film I realized I was saying acknowledgement a lot. I'm sorry, I just like that word. It's a beautiful word, and it's helping me stay grounded in a lot of my day-to-day, is acknowledgement of the realities of my situations, of the realities of how I feel in those moments, because it doesn't do any good to bury that deep down. I mentioned in the film, it doesn't do any good to just suppress and wish away and be in denial constantly over how we genuinely feel about things. And so, yeah, that film is a nice acknowledgement. But then, past acknowledgement, what do you do with this? So I've externalized the feeling. I've worked through the feeling to some degree. And again, had to accept that it'll come back on me from time to time in my life. Well, this is where the decompression part of this whole escapade comes in, because you'll notice I am currently on the road, and what I'm going to do is head out to a couple of Barnes and Nobles to hunt down a particular film, because what I found myself doing the day after the film premiered, after I'd kind of gotten that anxiety surrounding sharing it with people out there, was step one was I started just delving into my watch list of movies, because I'll add movies into my watch list because I'm like, oh, I'll catch up with this finally, or people have been raving about this particular film, I'll catch up with it now. And I never do. I get caught up in regular day-to-day work stuff, I get caught up in my own film stuff, I have my existential dread and dive headfirst into that stuff, and all other activity kind of gets tabled. So Saturday, I dedicated pretty much the whole day to trying to thin out my watch list a little bit on all my different platforms, on Amazon, on my Netflix, some stuff on YouTube, and some stuff on the Max app, because the Max streaming service, as much as I don't love the practices of the parent company, the streaming service still plays host to a lot of great films. And I've been meaning to finally dive into the filmography of the actress Gina Rowlands, who passed away a few weeks ago, who left an incredible impression on the world of film between her collaborations with Cassavetes and other projects. I realized that, I have this glaring Gina Rowlands blind spot, and I need to do something about that. So I started adding her movies to my watch list. So I've still got Faces. I've been trying to find Love Streams on a service, but I think I'll have to rent it unless I find it on my excursion today. But I watched Woman Under the Influence, her 1974 film with John Cassavetes as director and Peter Falk playing her husband. Nick, I mentioned this in my letterbox. Nick seems way more out of control than her character Mabel. I mean, her character Mabel, the whole thing is about, very relatable, a person having a mental breakdown, and how people in the 70s probably weren't best equipped to deal with that, as the film either inadvertently or purposely attests to, because, holy God, that is a lot of raw nerves for a 2.5 hour runtime, I believe. I said this also in my review, it's weapons grade uncomfortable, but done so well. Her acting is unbelievable, extremely moving, extremely compelling. I felt reservoirs of empathy for her, the character of Mabel. At first, some reservoirs of empathy for Nick, but then as the movie goes on, I'm like, wow, Nick, you are the worst. Entertaining performance from Peter Falk, absolutely. No one is skimping on the performances, but oh my God, the things that happen in the last portion of the film, the amount, I'm not going to spoil it, but the amount of, gaslighting, the amount of negging, the amount of outright violence displayed by Nick to Mabel and to the rest of his family. And you kind of wonder why Mabel retaliates in exaggerated fashion the way she does. So, oh man, it stuck with me considerably. So that's one thing I'm going to try to look for, is because I want to own that movie now. I want to own A Woman Under the Influence. And I don't know if it's going to be part of that whole Cassavetes Criterion pack of films, because Barnes & Noble, home of Criterion, probably should have had this epiphany during the half-off sale, but it is what it is. I'm not going to dole out for the whole Cassavetes set, as wonderful as that would be. Jesus, that's a lot of money. But if I can just find A Woman Under the Influence on its own, absolutely. I think I can splurge for that. Or, and this is if I can't find either or I'll have to make like a Sophie's Choice. There's another movie that I'm going to keep my eyes open for. And that is the Jim Jarmusch film Down by Law, which I finally saw yesterday as well. I did a whole deep dive into a whole bunch of movies, and the ones that stuck out were A Woman Under the Influence and Down by Law, which I believe was 1986, starring John Lurie, Tom Waits, as always the phenomenal Tom Waits, and Roberto Benigni. And if I find Down by Law, I'll talk a little bit more about my relationship to Roberto Benigni, but how that relationship has shifted because of his involvement in Jarmusch projects. Because I'm not gonna lie, I think I'm a jarhead, and by jarhead I mean a Jim Jarmusch fan now. I've at this point seen 6 or 7 of his films. I think the first one I ever saw was Dead Man. Really loved Dead Man. Then went over to Only Lovers Left Alive, one of his more recent movies from the 2010s, with Tilda Swinton and Tom Hiddleston as vampires. Sorry, it's there in the premise. But love that. loved his anthology movie, Coffee and Cigarettes, which basically was just a series of shorts that he's filmed throughout the years with a bunch of different people. And they are the most fascinating, just great kind of conversations for the sake of conversations type of movies, and are definitely my vibe. And that's the thing. Jim Jarmusch, his style, there's a reason it speaks to me, and it feels really accessible because it feels like things that I would do if I had many more resources that he does, and that it's something I'm doing definitely on a smaller scale. It's just the idea of the conversation, the art of the conversation, and how those conversations can go from whimsical to uncomfortable to just the characters, even though a lot of the times the characters in his projects are basically the actors playing heightened versions of themselves. That really appeals to me a lot. And Down by Law, like I said, I felt what is the most balanced of all these things that Jarmusch has done thus far. Like I said, maybe some of his other movies I haven't seen yet will speak to me in other ways, but there's this surreal kind of fantasy element to it, even though it's the most grounded story about three guys escaping from a Louisiana prison or a New Orleans prison. There's something about the lockdown camera and how basically you have all these different moving parts in the actors' performances and the set, and even the soundtrack plays a significant role. But there's a scene towards the end of Down by Law where Roberta Benigni is dancing with this woman Nicoletta that he's met, and they're all just sitting down together having breakfast. You have Roberto and Nicoletta dancing to this music. You have Tom Waits and John Lurie like kind of just relaxing and reclining in their chairs at the dinner table. And you see so much shift in those performances over the span of just a needle drop song. You see kind of Roberto's demeanor shift and change. You see Nicoletta start to become more, I don't know, the look I would describe it as is like euphoric kind of acceptance of the situation. And then you see kind of John Lurie and Tom Waits get really quiet and really reserved and almost like really affected by the display of tenderness and love that's being put on before them. And that just stuck with me. And I'm like, okay, watch the Max, great. I need to own this movie too. So, depending on if I find either of these films, I may have to make a decision. And yeah, well, if I do decide on one of them, or if something else catches my eye, who knows, I'll get more in depth into what I really enjoyed about those movies. So we'll see what that's like. Great film, but oh my god, so gross. Way to go, Cronenberg. Okay, so this Barnes and Noble was kind of a bust in terms of finding those films. Um, Man, a lot of great selections overall, a lot of great like new releases too that I'm curious about. But nah, I've got my heart set on either or of these films. So thankfully, though, about I want to say 10 or 12 miles down this way is another Barnes and Noble, and it's pretty early. I got here just as this one was opening, so by the time I get there, that one should be open as well. So let's see if we bear some fruit on the next destination. Just had a funny thought, like, what would be ironic is if this little starts off as like a decompression video log, ends up having a longer runtime than the actual feature film I made that I'm currently in the midst of decompressing from. Poetry. So yeah, that Barnes and Noble was kind of a bust too. Weren't carrying either film, which is okay. I'm not like thoroughly disheartened or anything by it. Just kind of funny that I decided I'm gonna put together this whole quest, seek out these grails, and eh. But also, it's just kind of speaking to my whole idea that my desire to push and promote and to preserve physical media for myself, if not anyone else. Because yeah, I do have the films with me technically, up here, of course, but also they're still on my streaming services at home. It's just it feels like an impermanence when I quote unquote own something on streaming. And I know all of this is impermanent. Physical media is impermanent. Like, it can degrade, it can wear down over time. You could lose your favorite movies. You could lose the physical copies of them, certainly. But there's something about having a tangible version of it available to you whenever you need it. Compared to, say, it's in the Max streaming platform, for example. And as I mentioned earlier, that parent company is pretty fickle about what they want to keep on there that'll make them the fast and easy bucks. And that can be a hindrance to people who have very specific kind of niche interests in terms of film and movies and shows, is that they could easily wipe those projects off their platform if they feel like, you know what, there's nothing really financially viable there for us. And that's the sad part of it, is that the people who do enjoy those movies, who do enjoy those projects, they don't have at least a long-standing physical version of it once that online version is gone. So that's kind of the disheartening thing. And that's why, again, I'm pushing the idea, like, if you have a passion for a specific type of film or filmmaker or type of art form, and there are physical versions of it for you to be able to own and call upon for yourself, if you feel that's a good investment for your creative flourishing and your mental and emotional well-being, certainly. Don't go overboard with it, obviously, but yeah, find ways to make it work. So, it started to rain a little bit, so I thought I'd just find a parking spot and chill out for a little while, because while I didn't acquire the films that I set out to get today, I did find one that I had expressed curiosity about earlier on, and yeah, decided to, what the hey, let's go with a purchase. Love Streams, Gina Rowlands, John Cassavetes, not just directing but starring alongside her. So yeah, I've found um, that the most impulsive purchases of films end up being the most enjoyable for me. The ones where I'm spurred on solely by a genuine curiosity in how my response to the movie will play out. Um, so it's yeah, it's a curiosity because the way it's described here, and I don't really know much about Cassavetes' filmography too much. He's another kind of blank spot in my filmography that I feel like I've been sorely lacking for a while. So I decided, what the hey, let's actually do something about that. So, according to this, the electric filmmaking genius John Cassavetes, humble brag there, but whatever. It's, he's passed away. Give him notoriety, sure. And his brilliant wife and collaborator Gina Rollins give luminous, fragile performances as two closely bound, emotionally wounded souls reunite after years apart. Exhilarating and risky, mixing sober realism with surreal flourishes. Love Streams is a remarkable film that comes at the viewer in a torrent of beautiful, erratic feeling. This inquiry into the nature of love in all its forms was Cassavetes' truly personal work. I like that. Um, Sober realism with surreal flourishes. That's absolutely something that I feel can speak to me in a profound way. It's a little bit what I feel is represented not just in this type of stuff, but in Jarmusch's work too. It can be whimsical, it can be quirky, but then there's some very grounded, very difficult moments that I'm appreciative that they're acknowledged, that they're given an artful kind of representation. But from what I witnessed in A Woman Under the Influence, is that, wow, uh, Cassavetes and especially Gina can absolutely take you to some uncomfortable places, but you're not disappointed that you're along for that ride necessarily. That it can be, despite it being difficult and hard and at times bleak, it can be very fulfilling, very um, what you need, I guess. So, yeah, I saw this on the shelf at the last Barnes and Noble and thought, you know what, maybe I'll try to find a way to rent it. But then I read the description, and in that moment, I knew like I'm gonna give this a shot. Um, I need to see what this is about because that description absolutely like speaks to me on some deep-seated level that I just knew like, okay, let's go for it. And yeah, maybe that's what's needed in order to decompress from the task I set out um, about a month ago, trying to finish this project. And again, I recommend you watch it. Certainly, you might have to be in a certain mood or mindset to watch it, but I hope it brings some degree of enjoyment or at least engagement or thoughtfulness. And sorry if it ends up being an overwhelming experience. I hope it isn't. And again, just know that I'm good. I'm managing, and it's doing things like that, making films like that, watching films like this, talking about films and other media that I value, sharing my joy or my interest in them with all of you. That keeps me balanced. That keeps me from going into the deep well of my own angst or my own dread on a more regular basis. And yeah, I'll let you know how it turns out. Gina didn't steer me wrong with Woman Under the Influence, so I doubt she'll slump on this. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.